Today, we're really digging into a stack of sources you sent over, focusing on, well, a critical issue here in America, food insecurity. It seems to be getting worse.
Hmm.
Our aim isn't just to skim the stats, but to really understand the scale, the economic factors driving it, and maybe the urgency the sources are talking about.
Exactly. That's the plan.
Yeah.
We want to pull out the core facts from this material. Get a handle on just how many people are affected, what specific financial pressures are making it tougher. The sources are pretty clear on that. And also look at why current help might be falling short. Basically asking, what's the real picture of hunger in the U.S. right now based on this data?
Okay, let's unpack this though. Starting with the big numbers. The sources hit you right away with this figure. More than 47 million Americans. That's 47 million people without reliable, affordable access to nutritious food. It's hard to wrap your head around that number in a country like this.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the phrasing there, the sources are careful about it. It's worth looking at that definition they're using. It's not simply about, not having any food. It's the lack of reliable, affordable access to nutritious food. That tells you it's about chronic stress, not just immediate hunger. It's about making tough choices, about nutritional quality being compromised.
Right. So it's more persistent than just feeling hungry sometimes. It's this ongoing state where you can't count on getting good food consistently. What does that unreliability actually look like, according to the sources? What happens day to day?
Well, it creates this kind of cycle, the sources point out, sort of feast or famine situation within a single month for many families. They might manage okay right after getting paid or when the benefits arrive, but towards the end of the month, that reliable access just evaporates. So they end up having to buy cheaper options, often high-calorie, low-nutrient stuff, just to stretch the budget. And that itself is a kind of nutritional deficit.
That framing shifts it, doesn't it? From just poverty to something impacting long-term health, even dignity. We should come back to that. And within that huge 47 million figure, the sources really zoom in on kids. The statistic is, well, it's stark. 1 in 5 children facing this daily.
Yeah, and that stat is so important because it connects today's problem directly to tomorrow's society. The sources really stress how inconsistent access to good food affects everything for a child's brain development, long-term health, how they do in school. When you have like 20% of your kids starting out with that instability, well, that national emergency label the sources use starts to feel less like rhetoric and more like a description. It's a cost building up.
Okay, so we have the scale. Let's pivot to the why. Here's where it gets really interesting. The economic pressures driving this. Why are the numbers so high, especially now? What are the sources pointing to?
It's fundamentally about essential costs rising faster than incomes, especially for lower income households. And inflation's making it worse. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources identify this really tough combination hitting families. Soaring prices for rent, for gas, and for groceries all at once.
And those aren't exactly optional expenses, are they? They're basic needs.
Exactly. That's the key. You have to think about budget flexibility or the lack of it. For some people, maybe higher grocery prices mean fewer meals out. But for a family already spending, say, 40% or even 50% of their income just on food, a 15% jump in grocery costs, that's an immediate crisis. There's no fat to trim. The sources show this forces families into these impossible choices, the dilemma you mentioned, pay the bills or buy enough food.
Can you give an example of that choice? What does that actually mean for someone based on what's in the sources?
Oh, the sources are full of them, and they're pretty tough to read. It's things like, okay, do I delay fixing the car I need for work, or do I skimp on groceries this week? Do I skip a doctor's visit copay, or do I make sure my kids have fresh fruit? One source mentioned families putting off basic home repairs like fixing a leak because every spare dollar has to go to the food budget right now.
Yeah.
It's constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul, just with essential needs.
Which brings us straight to the system designed to help. S&T benefits, food stamps. The sources definitely call it a lifeline for millions. But then there's this crucial finding that even relying on S&P is, and I'm quoting here, no longer enough. What specifically is breaking down with S&P, according to the source material, in this economy?
This is really central to the analysis in the sources. S&P is vital, no question. But the argument is its structure just isn't built for this kind of rapid inflation. The main problem seems to be that the benefit amounts don't adjust fast enough to keep up with the actual rising cost of living, especially for those nutritious foods we talked about. The sources point out that the average benefit per person often just doesn't cover the real cost of an adequate diet for a whole month anymore. Think about it. If food prices jump 10% in a year, But the benefit calculation only increases by, say, 2% or 3% because of how the rules are written or maybe outdated poverty metrics. Well, your buying power shrinks fast, so the help is sort of calibrated for last year's prices or the year before. It leaves people struggling, even when they get the maximum help. The safety net has holes.
Okay, so we've got the scale, that huge 47 million number, and the cause. This economic squeeze combined with a safety net that's struggling to keep up. This leads to the final really powerful point in the sources, the way they talk about it. They're explicit. This isn't just a statistic, it's a national emergency.
And that shift in language from problem to emergency, it's not just words. It feels like a demand for a different response. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the authors seem to be pushing for a rethink of national priorities. An emergency usually triggers immediate, large-scale action.
Right.
That's different from just managing an ongoing social issue.
And within that emergency frame, the sources highlight three specific ideas: hunger, dignity, and hope. Why those three?
Well, using those terms seems aimed at moving the discussion beyond just economics into basic human rights. Hunger is the obvious physical need, of course, but dignity, that speaks to how people get food. If you're constantly forced into those awful choices we talked about, rent or food, that undermines your dignity. The sources seem to argue that a dignified system gives people real choice and access to quality food, not just bare minimum calories. And hope, well, hope comes from stability. If you're always worried about where the next meal is coming from, it's almost impossible to plan ahead for education, for savings, for anything long-term. The sources suggest that fixing food insecurity frees up that mental energy, that bandwidth, giving people the chance to build a better future. That's the real payoff they're highlighting.
It's a compelling case for treating food access almost like critical infrastructure, not just charity. That term, national emergency, suggests inaction itself is a threat.
Precisely. The implication, if you follow the sources, is that calling it an emergency means we should be mobilizing resources differently. Maybe bringing in expertise from logistics, agriculture, community planning, coordinating things with the kind of urgency we use for, say, a natural disaster. It means seeing a large, hungry population, not just as unfortunate, but as an immediate risk to the country's health, both economic and social.
And underlying all this data and analysis, the sources circle back to this fundamental moral point that nobody in America should go hungry. That seems to be the core principle they want us to grapple with.
Right. This has been a really insightful deep dive into the material you shared. We've covered the scale over 47 million people, 1 in 5 kids. That's sobering. We looked at the economic drivers, that tough mix of rent, gas, and grocery costs, forcing impossible choices. And we landed on the source's conclusion that even key support like SNAP is falling short right now. It's just not enough in the face of this crisis. And we spend a fair bit of time on the sources calling this a national emergency. So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this. If we really take that emergency framing seriously, as the sources urge, what does that actually look like in practice? What actions in your own community or on a national level would only make sense if we treated hunger with the absolute urgency of a true emergency instead of just a chronic problem? What kind of mobilization does that imply? What resources, what policies need to happen now? Something to think about.